Welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight, a little overview. Here's where we are as of 8 p.m. Eastern, which is to say right now. In many places in this country, Americans cannot go to the park with their children. They can't go to church. They can't have family dinners with their relatives. They can't go to the dentist. They can't get a knee replacement. They can't get married. Tens of millions of them can't afford to do much of anything right now because they're unemployed. But they'd better not complain about it. If they voice their complaints online, they're liable to be censored by the tech companies. If they complain in public, they could be arrested, and a number of them have been. The whims of our political leaders are now unquestioned law. Dissent has been banned, and that ban is relentlessly enforced by the willing stooges in our media who have finally stopped pretending they don't hate you. They definitely do. What country is this? Well, it's a country in a lockdown. We're told we have no choice but to do this, to stop our lives completely. Mass quarantines, they tell us again and again, are the only way to save lives. But that's a lie. They don't know it's true, despite what they claim. There is no scientific record to consult. It's never been done. We're currently living through the largest and most expensive experiment ever conducted in human history. We have spent trillions of dollars and crushed millions of people purely on the guess that a nationwide lockdown would save us from the coronavirus. Has it worked? Was the guess correct? Let's look at the data. That's where we should always begin. It's what our leaders should be consulting daily. Here it is. As of tonight, 8 U.S. states have not issued statewide shelter-in-place orders for their citizens. Those states are Arkansas, Iowa, Nebraska, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Utah, and Wyoming. The question is, have these states suffered for not locking down? And the answer is no, they haven't, at least not yet. Currently, all 8 states are below the national average in coronavirus cases and deaths per capita. That's not to say they've been immune to the virus. They haven't been. But they definitely have not been hit harder than other states. Now, as a matter of social science, those 8 states are, it is true, on average smaller and less dense, in some cases much less dense than the hardest hit states. But you can adjust the numbers. In a recent article, journalist and professor Wilfred Riley did the math on this. He compared states that are locked down to states without lockdowns. He then performed statistical regressions that accounted for population, density, income levels, age, and racial diversity. He put his formulas right up there and challenged people to run the same numbers through those formulas or change them, come to a different conclusion if they could. No one has so far. Here's what he found. He found that a state's lockdown strategy had virtually no effect on how severe its outbreak of the Wuhan coronavirus was. Are you surprised by this? Maybe you shouldn't be. You can see the same trend at work in other countries. Sweden, most famously, has never locked down. Restaurants there have never closed. That country is still suffering from coronavirus, suffering more, in fact, than we are here in the U.S. But the country's epidemic appears to have peaked. And without locking down, Sweden, and this is the key, has fared far better than other European countries that did lock down. That includes Britain, Italy, Spain, Belgium. How can this be true? It seems to contravene everything we hear all day long. Lockdowns stop the virus. That's what they tell us, almost always at high volume and with maximum outrage and self-righteousness, daring us to disagree. But in fact, there's not much evidence that it's true. Consider the state of California, which was one of the first states to shut down. In a televised statement, Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti bragged that his city was under his absolute personal control. And for that reason, the coronavirus would not spread there. Anyone who disobeyed him would be hunted down. That's literally the phrase Garcetti used. Watch this.
This has really been marvelously embraced by 99.9% of people. We see it in the traffic data, we see it in the cell phone data, but we're going to hunt down that last 0.1% and say, you got to get inside, you got to cut it out, and you got to distance.
We're going to hunt down people who are outside? They spent years calling Donald Trump a fascist, if only. Garcetti, you may have just heard, brag that he was surveilling people's cars and tracking their cell phone use. But even that wasn't far enough for him. Garcetti also intentionally ruined city parks in Los Angeles just so that nobody could use them without his personal authorization.
We saw this week, for instance, at the skate park at Venice Beach, and people were there, so we had to put sand into the skate park to make that unusable for now. When we come out of this, we'll clean that sand out.
No modern political leader in this country has ever talked like this, ever. And yet suddenly in cities across the nation, so many of them are talking just like that. It's authoritarian. Has this new authoritarianism produced results apart from a surge of power for the politicians exercising it? Well, let's see. Again, to the numbers. A new study by researchers at USC, University of Southern California, tested large groups of people in Los Angeles County for coronavirus antibodies. They found that as of early April, up to 5.6% of the entire county had contracted the illness. That means up to 320,000 adults in Los Angeles apparently had already had it. At the time, the official number of infected people was about 8,000. City officials had no clue. They weren't even close. The virus had spread throughout a huge population right in the middle of the most restrictive quarantine in American history. What does that tell you? It tells you the lockdown didn't work. The question is, why exactly did it fail? And we don't know. We can only guess. Maybe people ignored the requirements of it, or maybe full enforcement of it was impossible, despite the fact they were tracking people's cars and cell phones. Or maybe forcing people to stay inside all day isn't actually a good way to contain a virus. Whatever the reason that it failed, it did. Our leaders guessed wrong. They claimed that a lockdown would halt the spread of the virus. It did not do that, not even close. And they need to admit that. And then we need to change our approach based on the science, not on their whims, on the numbers, on what we've learned. But we're not doing that. Public officials are instead, by and large, ignoring any evidence that indicts their policies, or critically, that might threaten their new and much-loved power. They don't want to know what the facts are. Indeed, some of them are even now, right now, promising even longer lockdowns, ones that extend maybe through the end of the summer, and even tougher punishments for those who disobey them. They're deploying drones to catch people who dare to go outside. Americans. This is insanity. It is definitely, and this cannot be stated emphatically enough, it is definitely not science. This is not science. It has nothing to do with the public's health, much less the broader public interest. This is instead what happens when mediocre people suddenly find themselves with godlike power, deciding who can go outside, when people can get married, which medical procedures you're allowed to have. That's a feeling of omnipotence, and they like that feeling. It fills an empty place inside. They don't want to give it up. They want it to last forever, even as the country dies. But it can't last forever because it's not their country. It's ours.